Thank you. How is everyone doing? Lucky. Uh, so just a quick introduction. My name is Tarus Kipkoske. I am a product manager at a company called Ibuka here in Nairobi. I've been a product manager for about 1 year and 6 months now. And my talk will be about how this journey has been so far, how it's like to start out as a product manager, and what I've learned so far, and the mistakes I made along the way. Uh, Given that I'm not I wouldn't say an experienced product manager. I know that would take maybe 3-4 years of work before we can say that. Uh, so I think this talk will benefit mostly anyone who's thinking of starting out or who's just started out. And for those who are more experienced, I guess I'm mostly here to hear your thoughts and learn from you as well. So you'll have to forgive me, as I was telling you that the beginning I'd planned to come and make my slides this evening after I'd written the talk. But as I was planning that, people were planning to meet on the road and block the highway. So I'll have to continue without the slides, but I will make them and send them to the team here so that they can share it with anyone who will be interested. All right, so let me just get started with a little bit about my history and the history of the company where I'm working. I think it will give context for the rest of the talk. So I work at a company called Ibuka. Ibuka was born uh, as a company that was doing delivery services. So it was literally, we had a fleet of motorbikes that we hired out to customers. Uh, we hired riders and they would do the deliveries. So as that was going on, since the founder of the business, who's my boss and my mentor as well, he is someone with a strong tech background and a founder at another company that's tech centric. So one of the things he was very interested in was how we could build our own technology to help the business be more efficient and provide better services. So I was hired as an operations manager at Ibuka to handle things on the ground, where dealing with guys with who work with bikes and all that, but also at the same time provide. Since I had a bit of a tech background, I also did data analysis, providing insights into how we could improve our operations and stuff like that. As we did the business, it got to a point where we realized um, our model wasn't working out. So it was a bit too expensive to run a business that's centered on motorbikes, especially if you've ever worked with motorbike riders. They can be a bit of a handful. You can ask me about the experience later on. Um, so as when we realized that, we decided to pivot the business to be fully software. And then what pushed us in that direction was the fact that we built something to use in-house, and it was a bit successful. Customers liked it because they'd had some interaction with it, and we decided, okay, this can be something we can pay people can pay to use. So we decided to figure out how to launch as a purely software business, sold off the bikes, and in the process, I was approached by my boss and mentor. He told me, since we're going in this direction, and since you have really great context on how our customers run their businesses, how things are on the ground, we'd like you to take up the role of PM. Before that point, not, I didn't know the role existed, if I'm being honest. I didn't know what a PM does. I, I didn't know what value they bring to the company, what skills they needed. But I was assured that I've already been doing some of the things that a PM does. Like, for example, I was um, taking the experience that we have in the field and uh, giving our developers requirements basically on the kind of software we'd need to help make our work easier. So with that, I got started, and my very first day on the job, I was handed a book called Inspired by Marty Kagan, as well as a list of things to do. So, and I was assured that if I read the book and continued to work, I'd get a hand of how the job works, and I'd know what to do in a few months. So early on, this part, I guess I'd concentrate. I'll let you guys in on the work I was doing and some of the mistakes I made was while I was starting out, and how those mistakes and the lessons I got from that shaped me. So earlier on, I was mostly doing project management. So planning our Scrum meetings, facilitating collaboration between team members. Um, our sprint cycles were set. We were doing 1 week sprint cycles, and after each sprint cycle, I'd have to go and meet my boss and tell him what we've been doing for the week, what we've achieved, um, or who was struggling and what they were struggling with. And that was the really tough bit of the job, because it was always very fast paced and there was a lot of pressure going on within the company at the time. So um, I quickly learned how to handle that part of my job. I was also doing writing requirements. At the time, we were building a system that would be used mainly for point-to-point deliveries, and and the software reflected that. We'd go out and figure out what our customers loved and what they needed, but it was mostly within the realm of motorbike deliveries, and we were mostly reacting to what our customers wanted. There was no discovery, or there was very little discovery. We'd mostly react to things that happen on a day-to-day basis, and from that we'd build software to kind of automate those things we do manually. I was also doing a lot of field testing at the time. We were I remember we'd go out with the CEO very early in the morning for rides, and so that we could test how our tracking works on the system and stuff like that. It was very interesting and a bit laborious. Um, some of the mistakes I made early on, I guess this is a point I'd like to highlight and focus on. Some of the mistakes I made early on and the things I got out of that. So while I started the job, for a bit of context, I was the first person to be hired by the company, and we got developers later on. When we switched to being a fully software company, we did a massive hire and hired quite a few developers all at once. Being the only PM in the company, um, I guess led to me, and being very new at the job as well, led to me making quite a number of mistakes. Um, for example, I would do a lot of design decisions. I would make a lot of the design decisions, despite the fact that we had a designer. So I would do a lot of the UI. I would make a lot of the UI decisions. Another thing was I'd play a role in how our engineers build things, which I came to learn is a big no for engineers. Um, I would have a hand in how they design ERDs, build algorithms, and it led to a bit of conflict and maybe even slowed the team down as we were doing things. Uh, we had to learn the hard way that that's out of the scope of PM work, and very it's a big no for PMs to do. Um, Another big mistake I made was backing down when I knew something was right. For example, when I know a feature is built in has been designed in an unintuitive way, for example, or we've made a compromise that leaves the user shortchanged, and leave it as is, and that led to quite a lot of rework. Once we launched and realized this thing that doesn't work, it's not fit for our users. Mm, One another mistake was designing in the lab. I know this is something we do a lot. We sit in the office, we come up with ideas, and we design things. Someone might come up with a brilliant idea, and most of the time they're actually pretty good ideas because people have quite a lot of context on what's going on. So someone would come up with an idea, and the entire team is like, this is brilliant. Anyone who uses this software will love this feature. But as soon as you launch, you realize no one's using it. It sits there, and after you've spent quite a number of working days on it or working weeks on it. Lastly, I'd say not being technically knowledgeable as much as I needed to be. That led to quite a few funny scenarios. One time, a developer told me that users will have to write their name separated with underscores because the system couldn't take spaces. It was quite very interesting. So as we launched the initial part of the business, we were launching basic in response to a sale. We made a sale, and people were excited. We rushed to create a product that would fit, and we rushed to launch that product without testing it as much as we needed to. And we got punched in the face quite a lot. There were very many egg on face moments once we launched. And uh, some of the things we learned from that uh, is what I'll go into next. And this is the part where I'll focus on when creating a slide. For those who are just joining, apologies for that. I couldn't have it ready in time, but I'll share it with the organizers as soon as the meeting is complete. So part of the things I learned that really came in handy for me later on were basically the 5 things that I lean on now as a product manager, the 5 areas of knowledge. The first one is customer knowledge. Um, I was told pretty early on when I started that the primary currency for a product manager is customer knowledge. You have to be the expert on everything customer related. You should be as passionate about your customer's business as you are about your own. Learn about how they work, what their processes are, what departments they have in their business, um, what their attitudes towards technology is as a company. Um, Learn about their leaders and their leadership style, who's in charge, who's second in command, and stuff like that. At first, it didn't hit. I didn't realize how important it was until we started an actual rollout. And then you realize that as much as you're building technology, you're building it for humans. And where change management is such a big thing, especially considering we are B2B business. Change management is a very massive thing, and it's very tough to handle. So you have to know who to run to when problems creep up. So that's the first one. It's on customer knowledge. The second one is on data. Uh, so how do you use your data? How do you gather enough data, for example, to know things like who uses your product, um, if they use it in a way that you designed it, in what features are used and what aren't, for example. And also lets you run tests, like knowing once a feature is built, once you change something, will it be easier to use? Will it be tougher? Will it take more time or less time to complete a certain workflow, for example? The next area of knowledge that I focused on was the business. Um, so that's knowing who your stakeholders are, what they value, um, what your goal is as a business, how much time and money you have to build features, and what's important to you as a business, basically. Yeah. And should you make any choice, I learned early on, you have to justify your choice. So between two features, between spending time on this thing or another, why did you make the choice, and how can you justify that choice? Um, the fourth bit that is important, that I realized is important and focus on, is the market and the industry in general. So you never work in a vacuum. And within your space, who are your competitors? Uh, what strategy do they use, for example? And to get insights into their strategy, you look into things like who they target, who their target customers are, how they talk about their own business, the kind of features they're offering. And the last part is on project management. So what's important to know here is the level of skill you have, of skill on your team, how to prioritize, for example. There's quite a number of uh, frameworks that are used out there. Um, so these five areas, the customer, data, business, the market, and project management, all came from my what I call my Bible. It's basically the book that I was given to read and have stuck with ever since. It's called Inspired by Marty Kagan. Very nice book for anyone who's new to who's new to product management, and even for the people who are more experienced. It's really nice to read, and because it gives you a very good overview of the entire field and the entire business, and the entire profession. Sorry. Um, So let me move on to the last bit of the uh, presentation, just to talk about. I've seen someone ask about the name of the book and author. I'll type it in the chat as at the last bit, because I think I have a number of books I can recommend. So I'll just put them all in the chat to put them all together in the chat. So the second half is this last bit of the presentation is basically how what I learned from the earlier mistakes helped me, and um, and the recommendations that I'd make for anyone who's starting out, or even the more experienced people. So what did what I learned help me with? So the first thing that I began to focus on truly when I got a bit more experience and a bit more knowledge on product management was the customer. So figuring out what customer verticals you're going after, who the personas are, um, it really helps you think about your product and how to and make decisions on that daily. So anytime you come up with a problem or with a feature and you're thinking about it, you have a particular persona in mind. You have a particular individual even, and you think about how they'll use this and how it'll help them in their day to day. Just to bring it into the story of how I learned this. After we got a bit stable with our first customer, if you recall, we were doing we mostly focused on point-to-point deliveries and dealing with motorbikes, where the platform was very well suited for motorbikes. But after a while, we realized it can't be the only thing we do. We have to branch out a bit, and with that, we began looking into how our product can help people in different customers in different sectors, in different verticals. Internally, we call this bit our post-Nduthi era, how and it's how the product has matured over time. So what it looked like to begin this post-Nduthi era, we started putting together our ideas on different different kinds of customers that could use the product. So the product is a logistics platform, and so we literally threw ideas on the wall on different kinds of people who have a huge bit of logistics that they deal with, manufacturers, courier companies, and other sectors like that. So it was throwing stuff on the wall and seeing what sticks. Then for any one thing that sticks, it was now the PM's job to, which is me, to go out and gather a list of companies in that segment. We'd come up with a very long list and come up with a value proposition for each segment. We'd put together not very high fidelity, but it's a high-ish fidelity prototype that we could use to show our ideas to these customers so that they would give us feedback that we'd use to improve our product, to improve our value proposition, and get our foot in more doors just to keep the conversation going and learn more about people or the guys who are going after, what their pain points are, and add more information like that. So that's the first time I really got an impression of how important it is to have customer contact. It cannot be overstated how important it is. My mentor had an idea, and he told me early on that 2 customer meetings a week, 2 to 3, is the base. That's the minimum. You should not go below that. And as he pointed out, it's basically one of the core things I bring to the team. Another thing that cycle of creating a prototype and showing it to the customer, one thing we were doing was handling the value risk. So that's basically whether you're going to build something that's valuable. You don't want to invest time to build something only to realize no one will use it. So in working to build the prototype, show it to people, get their feedback, we were handling value risk. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't know there was a thing called value risk. I didn't know it's something that you need to test for, but the people I worked with did, and I only came to realize later on how important that was, and use it in my own work going forward. So throughout the process, we iterated on the prototypes and came up with a solid idea of the product we wanted to build. And eventually we did a POC and it worked out quite well. We got a customer who was willing to implement the new version of the system with us. That experience itself, just being hands-on, really shaped my thinking about product management, its place in the company, and how important and valuable it is. It also showed me how much there is to learn, and it's one of the reasons I try and reach out to groups like this, where we can get to talk to PMs, get to know their experience, and so forth. So as we were building out the product, we got to a point where we began to do a competitive analysis. figuring out who else is in this market. What do they sell? And what can we do to gain an upper hand? So as we were doing that, we found us some competitors, found people using their product. We talked to them about the product. We found out where their products were falling short, and we came up with an idea for what to do to it's the kind of features that we need to stand out and to woo them. I can't go into the detail, but once we figured out what we needed, that was when I was handed my first real task to lead as a product manager. I think that was around 8 months after I joined. And the task was to lead the team to build out basically a whole subsystem of the platform. I had no idea where to begin, and I leaned a lot on my mentors to help me with the work. But they called it throwing you into the deep end, so they leave you to figure out how to swim. It was a bit tough, but very useful. One thing that I came across during that period that has stuck with me and that I use to this day is user journey map. I know it has different names in different places, but it's basically a document that outlines for a specific workflow what are the screens that will be there and what are the actions that will be taken on each screen, and the UI, the UX considerations that should be there to help the user along. It was a bit challenging to create that document. My first attempt was called woefully inadequate. I think that was the term that was thrown my way. But I took that in stride, continued to build, and I got a good working version of it eventually. I'll send a template, one template that I used to create it. As it comes along with, it comes with the considerations that you'll take while building such a document, like your goal, when your core technology will be wired in, how to make the workflow simple for the user. I can share that template along with the slides at the end of the talk. So I guess that will wrap up the session on my experience, and I can close with the recommendations that I have for the books that I read and other resources that I used that really helped me to wrap my head around this career of product management. It's a very interesting one, and it gets very tough. So the first one is inspired by Marty Kagan. The full title is Inspired: How to Build Tech Products That Customers Love. It's a wonderful book, my number one recommendation for sure. The second one is that Marty Kagan's book is basically an overview of the career of product management. It will tell you what value a product manager brings to the team, how to interact with your engineers, designers, and stakeholders. It'll give you some really good ideas or a springboard on how to work with Scrum, how to think about Scrum, how to think about the different kinds of value that you bring to the organization. It's an amazing book, very lovely, and I'd recommend it to anyone. The second book is called Don't Make Me Think. It's basically a book for that'll get you from 0 to 80% on UI and UX. It's easy to read, pretty easy to read, and very short, but it packs a punch. It's very much worth your time. The last, another one is called Envisioning Information. This one's by Edward Tufte. It's a bit of a tough book. You'll have to invest some time to read it, but it's about how to display information to users, especially when you're dealing with data products. So if there's anyone who's building a data product and it entails a lot of data visualizations, that's a really wonderful book you should pick up. Another one, the last resource that I use is regularly till now is Lenny's podcast. I'm sure there's so many of us who listen to it. It's a very nice podcast you can find on Spotify or Google Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Very lovely. He brings in product managers, product leaders, and asks really good questions that will give you good ideas and good knowledge that you can build on later on. So that's a wrap for my talk, and I guess I can invite questions from anyone before I go into asking questions myself. I'm pretty eager to hear from the rest of the PMs.
And sharing with us the knowledge that you gained over the past year with so much openness. Thank you so much for that. So my question is on this point that you made around a big no on you as a product manager having a say on working with engineers. So just perhaps very briefly, how did you deal with that?
Oh, okay. So thanks for that. I guess the big no isn't working with engineers, but it's telling engineers how to build something. So engineers are very creative people, and they love their job. It's very hard to find an engineer who isn't a bit geeky. So you can tell them what to build, but you should never tell an engineer how to build something. So what I learned and how I handle it now is I try to give them as much context as I can on what we're building. So I'd give them examples of how it's handled currently. I'd give them some wireframes maybe on the thinking I have around UX. But I wouldn't go out and actually tell them, okay, here's an ERD that you should implement, for example. Yeah.
Hi, good evening. Maybe you answered or because I dropped off because of some network. My question was just because what is the difference between the product lead and the product manager?
Okay. So the way I see it is it's just the way you'd have engineering lead and an engineer. The product manager isn't necessarily anyone's manager. The product manager just works as part of a team. So on an engineering team, you'd have, say, a couple of engineers, the product manager, and the product designer. Maybe you can throw in some test engineers, it depends on the organization. But the product manager is one of the team members and not the boss of anyone. So in an organization, you'd have several engineering teams, each with its own product manager, and each of the engineers on those engineering teams might report to an engineering lead or a chief engineer, maybe CTO, and the product managers will report to the product lead. So the product lead could be a CPO or a senior product manager, for example. Yeah. So the job of the lead would be to basically organize the teams and pass on knowledge, basically a manager's job. I hope that answers your question.
If I can add just a little to that, please. It really depends company to
Yes.
company on how the titles are given. So in some cases, you will find a product lead whose role is similar to a product manager, but it's just that the product that they're leading is so complex. So it's more about the breadth of or the complexity of the product that they're working on. So in such cases, you might also find someone called a product lead, but they still work with designers, researchers, and engineers.
Thanks, Angela. I think that's some good context. I can't see any other questions. Oh, Angie, your hand is up again. Yeah.
Yes, question for you. What's the
Okay.
part you love the most about being a PM and the part you could drop if you had the chance?
The part I love the most is customer contact. It's very interesting to go meet people, see what their business is like. Yeah, you find out what they like about their own business, what they don't like, and you get really good ideas around how to help them. It's very interesting and it feels meaningful to do. I guess that's why I enjoy it. What I don't like is, I guess, particular to my organization, but I do a lot of testing, writing test criteria, etc. That's not something all PMs do. I guess some teams have a whole testing team or a test engineer, but on my side, that's something I do a lot that I would drop if I had the chance. Yeah. Yeah, I guess if Christopher can clarify before I answer.
Hi, sorry. So my question is, you've talked about the parts that you love to interact with customers and to understand their business. So my question is, how will your role be if now you add business analysts who are interacting with customers and they are getting the requirements. How now will your role have been now in that case?
Okay. Personally, I'd suffer because that's one part I like. I like a lot, and I think I'd rather continue with that. But more generally, I can forward an article that I read on that. Considering a PM's, like I said, a PM's primary currency is customer knowledge, and there's no better way to gain that knowledge than to actually go and talk to people, talk to your customers, see what their business is like. So I'd say personally, I'd suffer, and for any PM out there, I don't think they should sacrifice customer contact for any reason. Even if there's a business analyst involved, maybe go hand in hand. Make sure you get those few hours of customer contact every week.
Hi, I'm Wendy Lembo. As you've mentioned, I'm a product manager at SparePup. So mine is not really a question, but just to add on what you've mentioned about the business analyst bit. So I'll say I've worked in such a setting, and the BI team's most task or important task is not even really to have interactions with the customer, but to kind of give us data about the customer. So the PM still remains as the primary contact to the customers, but then the BI team, in most cases, let me say in whatever the setting we're using, it was for them to majorly draw insights and give us data on the customer, the kind of task that the customer do, they partake, but not really to replace the PM in terms of the customer interactions. So the PM will still be the primary contact person to the customer, and the BI team will be there to support the PM in terms of just analyzing how they're interacting with the product and just give you feedback to also keep on improving on.
Thanks, Wendy. I think, Chris, that's actually a better answer than I could have given.
Yeah. I just read somewhere that also being a product manager, you need to be a good storyteller. And now that the customer is one part of the main critical part of it, you're able to handle. then this person coming in to be a PM as mostly an introvert. You call it an introvert. So how does it come? Or how does one come as an introvert to counter this part of being a storyteller and being talking to the customer most of the time?
Oh, thank you for that. I think I can answer. I can answer that because it's close to home. I think anyone who knows me would tell you I'm a bit of an introvert. I I was a bit shy about talking to customers or putting myself out there, and at first I actually didn't enjoy that bit as much. But the advice I got was to just swallow the pill. It's your job. You have to do it. You have to do it. So yeah, you swallow the tough pill. Unaenda nayo. When it's time to talk to customers, you remember it's your job. You go with all your material ready, and you make the most of that opportunity. Yeah, I guess the role has also helped me, I guess, shift from being a bit of an introvert to, I guess, being willing to put myself out there and talk in such an event.
Hi. Yeah, also congrats, Tony, on that. Good to see you. And I wanted to also jump in on that question from Lawrence. I started off as a software engineer, very shy boy on the corner, and then went to become a business analyst and now a product manager. I just wanted to also just chime in on that. One of the things I appreciate about the environment I was in was ownership. So I think you taking ownership and asking questions is really important. Don't just, I tell the engineers I work with, don't be a conveyor belt of features. Ask me why you're doing this. And slowly by slowly, you start getting out of the cocoon. The next thing I also was encouraged to do by my mentor at the time was to write blogs. I used to write blogs, share them on Facebook when Facebook was a thing, share on Twitter, and then people would like respond to me. So that also helped me like share my thoughts without having to speak. Then the next step was, as Tony has been done, was done for. I was thrown into the deep end. I was sent into a client meeting, big clients, and I was told, okay, you're going to represent us in this meeting tomorrow, right? Or okay, in a few days. So I have to prepare for that. And I think just the confidence I was building over time, writing blogs, and just getting out of that cocoon and asking the whys. Slowly you become more confident and understand why you're not just a conveyor belt of features. You understand why you're doing what you're doing, and the more you understand that, the better it becomes.
Thanks, Cliff. It's really nice to see you here. I think you've given me a phrase that I'll be using from now on. Don't be a conveyor belt of features. Thanks. So one of the things that I've encountered and I've been thinking about is the product vision and the product strategy. I know they're two big and vague terms, but from anyone in the group who's had experience, for example, thinking about product vision, crafting the product vision, and coming up with a product strategy. Could you chime in on any points for those two things? For one, I guess we could start with vision. For one on vision, how would you best describe what a product vision is? And for a particular product, how do you craft a vision for it? What are the things you consider? Yeah.
Hello, great to talk, Tony. Yeah, I'm Anne. I work as a product manager. Yeah, so for product vision, think about it, you're building a train and you want your train to reach Mombasa.
Okay.
So that's the vision, right? It's like a grand vision. Mombasa is hundreds of kilometers away, and strategy is all the different things you're going to do to get the train to arrive at Mombasa,
Okay.
and all the different functionalities you're going to insert into it. Are you going to put like a electric train or the SGR that we have? That's one way of thinking about it.
Oh, thank you. That's insightful. Yeah.
I wanted to try and take a stab at the vision and strategy question. I think it's when a startup or when a business first starts, the vision is held by the founder. And so, what's that big problem you're looking to solve with your product? Very early on, when you're starting out, that vision is almost equal to what the business is trying to deliver. And then, as a business grows and starts to get more customers, more impact, then you get to a point where your product can start to split out almost into multiple products. And Tony, is that the stage you're asking about, like how to build a vision for that stage, or you're talking about the bigger one that I just described where it's almost equal to the company one?
Yeah. So I didn't even have that dichotomy in my head. So I think that's something you've introduced. And I would wonder whether it makes sense to have a strategy when you're a startup. I guess, but you just keep going, and I'll just learn as you address this.
Yeah, so I'd encourage you and other PMs here not to stress about product vision when it's a business that's just starting out or a startup that's still like trying to get to product market fit, or really really early on before you have thousands or even millions of customers. But as you start to scale, then you have to be really specific around the vision of your product. So for example, I'm assuming that the person who started Gmail just saw this opportunity and created this vision that they were able to sell internally at Google around, hey, we can disrupt email in these ways. Or whoever came up with Threads, right, for Instagram. And so I think it isn't far from how we describe vision in general for anything else. It's the way Anne talked about, like, where are you trying to get to? What's this ideal place? And then strategy, in addition to what Anne said, is not only how, it's also how do you win? Like, what is unique about you? How are you going to do things differently? How are you going to differentiate to be able now to get to the vision you're going after?
Right. Thank you. And thanks for providing that separation between an early stage and I guess a more mature company.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I kept it too simple, but the idea is maybe if I expound on what I meant, and thanks Sanji for clarifying, is really when you're making a product, you have it has one function that you want it to solve for. Maybe it solves for one thing before it solves for many things, right? And that's the same way where you want to make a train and you want it to go somewhere. So you have to have wheels, you have to have a body, sitting positions, etc. So when you think about young startups, when they're starting, they have an idea that they can solve one problem or another, and they have suggestions for how they can go about solving that problem. And those suggestions are what are the strategies. The big idea of we want to solve this kind of problem is what's the vision at that point. Most of the time, the vision remains consistent. The only thing that changes is the strategies, and the strategies are what goes into the details of the roadmap, because then you have functions, and then you have UX and UI, etc. All those little items that go towards making that big vision. So I don't know if now it's much clearer, but at different stages, you always start with something simple, and then as you are advancing, you learn some more with the new knowledge that you gain. You improve on your product, and becomes a new iteration. So the strategy will change, but most of the time, unless you're how is it, rebranding and pivoting,
Yeah.
the vision more of the time remains the same. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. I think the last point would be when you're at the intersection of maturity, just when you're just maturing as a company and you've built on your initial vision, and you're starting now to think more about the future. I guess that would be the point where it would make sense to think of a strategy and build a roadmap based off of the strategy. Because of late, not of late, but since it was a really young company initially, our roadmap was basically whatever we were implementing for a particular client. After your product stabilizes a bit and each implementation becomes more or less copy paste, now how do you move into the thinking where, okay, now we have to align our roadmap around a new idea or a new vision? Uh, so I guess the question would be, is there anyone who's found themselves at such a position, and how was that handled? How do you handle that? Maybe resources that can help enlighten thinking around that sector.
Oh, I saw Angie's hand was up, so I was waiting. Lately, we're using this book, Working Backwards by Amazon. I think it's quite intuitive. One of the things a good friend told me, because I like to keep things simple, but sometimes simplicity will hurt you down the road, is remember, you as a startup or whichever stage of business you're in, you're trying to be fast to market to acquire as many users as possible. But then at some point, it becomes a race to the bottom. So you have to be very, without using the word strategy, strategic about how you want to, how fast the competition will catch up with you. I've worked specifically in edtech and govtech, where building a lot of learning and e-learning apps, and everybody is building the same thing. And so if you stick on a very simple journey path, you will lose your competitive edge very quickly. So I guess to answer your question, it's really sometimes you look at your business and where you're at, like fintech, edtech, you're in a race to the bottom. Whereas in some industries like AI, it's still very novel and not many people will catch up. It'll take a while. And so there your strategy and your vision have to be very agile at that point.
Okay, thanks. I think I'll.
Sorry, I'd forgotten to put my hand down. I don't have anything to add.
Mm. Okay. I'll go armed with this newfound knowledge on Monday and demand founder compensation. Okay. Not on my end. Thank you.
Sure. Hi again. I'm Angie Muigai. I head a function called Product Operations at Coco Networks, a fast growing startup looking to change how people cook, switch from charcoal to bioethanol. I've been in the product and tech space for a long time. And I started this community because I started the group because I felt like there weren't enough places, or at least none that I knew, where PMs in Kenya were coming together to discuss things that are locally relevant to how product is here. So there's a lot of content around how it's done in the US, how it's done in the West. And I thought we might have our own flavor. And so the vision is that we help each other grow as PMs and be really impactful in our roles and happy as well by sharing knowledge and coming together in forums like these. Thanks for making the time this evening to be here.
Hello, product management enthusiast. So I'm Roy Mangi, recent product management. So I landed into product management in early April. Started a couple of Udemy courses. Later on, I was so driven into it that I even started like applying to companies. So I got a chance to work with startups, and through the group, I've been able like to even get into inboxes of people and getting the experiences. Wendy has helped me a lot, like to understand what the day of a product manager is, what I'm supposed to do, because the role is very vague, especially when you even you're reading on maybe watching a tutorial. So I got to know about the group through Thai, through his LinkedIn page. Yeah. So and we hope when we ask for your feedback about the event and future events, you will respond. Thank you. There's a question from Juma.
Yeah, hi. Just to ask, how do one get into your team to as a management volunteer in different aspect of the management of the team? Yep.